A mafia boss never handles job interviews until he sees the bruise. Rain hammered against the glass towers of downtown Hartford as Kael Virelli sat across from a trembling young woman who wore poverty like armor and fear like perfume. She answered every question with rehearsed precision, but when her sleeve slipped, revealing purple fingerprints wrapped around her wrist, something ancient and violent stirred inside the man who built empires on silence and blood. He hired her on the spot. What he didn't know was that saving her would cost him everything he swore never to feel again. Stay until the end, like this video. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Like. The conference room smelled like polished mahogany and expensive cologne, the kind of scent that announced power before anyone spoke a word. Kael Virelli sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled beneath his chin, watching his consigliere Dante Mercer shuffle through resumes with the enthusiasm of a man sorting garbage. Outside, October rain turned Hartford into a blur of gray concrete and flickering brake lights. Last one, Dante muttered, sliding a thin folder across the table. 20 minutes late. Probably stuck in traffic or too stupid to leave early. Kael didn't look up. He had 3 phone calls to return, 2 shipments to reroute through the docks, and a city councilman who needed reminding that loyalty wasn't negotiable. Job interviews belonged in Dante's world, not his. Then why am I here? Because you told me to clear your schedule. Dante's voice carried the flat irritation of someone who'd worked for Kael long enough to speak freely. You said you wanted visible today. Corporate. Legitimate. Kael exhaled through his nose. Legitimate. The word tasted like ash. Virelli Holdings owned half the commercial real estate in Connecticut, employed 400 people across 12 subsidiaries, and generated enough revenue to satisfy any federal auditor with half a brain. But beneath the quarterly reports and boardroom presentations lived something far older, a network built on fear, discipline, and the understanding that some problems disappeared permanently. The door opened. She walked in like someone expecting to be punished. 23, maybe 24, dark hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. An oversized white blouse that hung wrong across her shoulders, like she'd borrowed it from someone twice her size. Black slacks that had been hemmed by hand. Shoes polished carefully enough to hide the cracks in the leather. But it was her hands that Kael noticed first. They trembled. Not nervousness, not excitement. Fear. Ms. Vale, Dante said without looking up. You're late. I'm sorry. Her voice came out too controlled, like she'd practiced the words in a mirror. The bus broke down on Farmington Avenue. I ran the last 6 blocks. Kael watched her breathing, shallow, measured, the rhythm of someone trying desperately not to panic. She sat down across from him with her spine rigid and her ankles crossed beneath the chair. Her gaze landed somewhere near his left shoulder, refusing direct eye contact. Dante flipped open her file. Says here you dropped out of college after 2 semesters. Yes. Why? She hesitated. Half a second too long. Financial reasons. Lie. Kael knew lies the way other men knew their own heartbeat. This woman wasn't broke. She was running. Work history's thin, Dante continued, scanning the page. Waitress, retail, some reception work. Nothing substantial. Why should Virelli Holdings hire you? Celine's jaw tightened. For a moment, Kael thought she might stand up and walk out. Instead, she lifted her chin and met Dante's eyes with something that looked almost like defiance. Because I show up, she said quietly. I don't call in sick. I don't complain. I don't cause problems. I do the work. That's baseline competence, Dante shot back. Not a selling point. Then let me prove it. The room went silent. Kael leaned back in his chair, studying her. Most people wilted under his stare. Politicians, rivals, men twice her size who'd spent their lives navigating violence. But Celine held his gaze for 3 full seconds before her eyes dropped to the table. Not submission. Exhaustion. Why do you want this job? Kael asked. His voice cut through the room like a blade, low and deliberate. Celine flinched, barely, just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. But Kael saw it. She opened her mouth, closed it, her fingers twisted together in her lap, knuckles white. Because I need it, she whispered. No rehearsed ambition, no corporate buzzwords, no performance, just survival. Kael glanced at Dante, who was already shaking his head. "We'll call you," Dante said flatly. "Thanks for coming in." Celine stood immediately, smoothing down her blouse with shaking hands. As she reached for her bag, her sleeve rode up. That's when Kael saw it. Purple and yellow bruises, perfectly shaped like fingerprints, wrapped around her left wrist. She yanked the sleeve down fast, too fast, and grabbed her bag. When she turned toward the door, Kael noticed the way she moved. Careful, deliberate, like someone nursing cracked ribs. "Miss Vale?" She froze. Kael stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. "You start Monday, 7:30. HR will handle your paperwork." Dante's head snapped up. "Kael, Monday," Kael repeated, his eyes still locked on Celine. For the first time since she'd entered the room, something resembling hope flickered across her face. It died just as quickly, replaced by suspicion. "Why?" she asked. Kael didn't answer. Because the truth, that he recognized the specific terror in her eyes, that he'd grown up watching his mother wear the same exhaustion, that hiring her had nothing to do with qualifications and everything to do with instinct, wasn't something he could say out loud. "Beyond time," he said instead. Celine nodded once, sharp and mechanical, then walked out of the room before he could change his mind. The door clicked shut. Dante stared at him. "What the hell was that?" Kael returned to his seat, pulling out his phone. "You said we needed visible." "Visible doesn't mean hiring damaged goods." Kael's finger paused over the screen. When he looked up, his expression hadn't changed, but something cold settled into his voice. "Don't call her that again." Dante raised both hands. "All right, your call. But that girl's carrying something heavy, and you don't need that kind of chaos near the business." Kael said nothing, because Dante was right, and that's exactly why Kael couldn't look away. Celine Vale lived in East Hartford, in a second-floor apartment that smelled like mildew and old cigarettes. The building had been condemned twice, then quietly reopened after the right palms got greased. Flickering hallway lights, peeling wallpaper, doors with too many locks. She unlocked hers at 6:47 p.m., grocery bags cutting into her arms. Inside, the apartment was dark, except for the glow of the television. A children's cartoon played at low volume, colors flashing across the stained carpet. On the couch, a small boy sat curled into himself, thumb in his mouth, eyes glazed. "Noah, baby." Celine set the bags down gently. "Did you eat?" The boy didn't respond. From the bedroom, footsteps. Heavy, uneven. Celine's entire body went rigid. Damien Cross stepped into the living room wearing sweatpants and a stained undershirt. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who looked strong until you noticed the softness around his middle, the bloodshot eyes, the way his hands curled into fists even when he wasn't angry. "Where the hell have you been?" Celine kept her voice calm, steady. "I had a job interview. I told you this morning." "Yeah?" Damien scratched his jaw, stubble rasping under his nails. "Told me a lot of things this morning. Told me you'd be home by 5. "The bus? I don't give a shit about the bus." He crossed the room in 3 strides, closing the distance between them until Celine could smell the beer on his breath. "You think you can just disappear for hours? Leave me here with him?" He jerked his chin toward Noah. "He's your son, too." "Wrong thing to say." Damien's hand shot out, gripping her chin hard enough to bruise. "Don't get smart with me." Celine didn't pull away. Didn't flinch. She'd learned years ago that resistance only made it worse. "I'm sorry," she whispered. His grip loosened. His thumb traced her jawline, almost tender now. "I worry about you, Cel. You know that, right? I get scared when you're gone too long." She nodded. He kissed her forehead. Then he walked back to the bedroom, leaving her standing in the kitchen with grocery bags at her feet and a child who'd stopped watching cartoons and started watching her. Celine exhaled slowly. Her hands were shaking again. Monday morning arrived cold and sharp, the kind of October chill that cut through cheap coats and settled into bone. Celine stood outside Virelli Holdings at 7:15 a.m., staring up at the glass tower that reflected the dawn sky in shades of copper and gold. She'd left the apartment at 5:30 a.m., kissed Noah while he slept, and caught 2 buses to get here early. Damien had still been asleep when she left, snoring in the bedroom with one arm thrown over his face. She wore the same blouse from the interview, the same cracked shoes. But today, she'd added a thin cardigan that covered her wrists. Inside, the lobby gleamed, marble floors, modern art installations, a security desk staffed by men in tailored suits who looked more like enforcers than receptionists. Celine approached cautiously, clutching the folder HR had emailed her. "Celine Vale," she said. "First day." The guard scanned her ID, made a phone call, then handed her a keycard. "14th floor. Someone will meet you." The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, a woman in her 50s waited, clipboard in hand, expression carved from granite. "Ms. Vale, I'm Margaret Chen, operations manager. Follow me." Celine followed. Margaret walked fast, heels clicking against polished tile, firing off instructions without looking back. Dress code, break schedule, security protocols, confidentiality agreements. The tour lasted 20 minutes and covered 3 floors, each one more intimidating than the last. Finally, Margaret stopped outside a small office near the end of a long hallway. "This is you. Data entry, document processing, filing. Straightforward work. Don't fall behind." She handed Celine a thick binder. "Read this by end of week. Questions?" Celine shook her head. Margaret studied her for a long moment, eyes sharp. "Mr. Varelli doesn't hire personally, ever. So whatever happened in that interview, don't screw this up." Then she left. Celine stood alone in the tiny office, surrounded by filing cabinets and outdated computers, and for the first time in 4 years, she felt something dangerous. Hope. Kael didn't see Celine again for 3 weeks. He wasn't avoiding her. He simply operated on a different floor, in a different world. While she processed contracts and organized spreadsheets, Kael met with developers, city officials, and the kind of men who never appeared on organizational charts. But he watched. Every night before leaving the building, Kael pulled up the security footage on his private terminal. He watched Celine arrive early, eat lunch alone at her desk, and leave at exactly 5:01 p.m. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. She never spoke to coworkers, never lingered in the break room, never smiled. And every week, something new appeared. First a bruise beneath her left eye, barely covered by foundation, then long sleeves in an overheated office, then a limp she tried to hide by walking slower. Kael recognized the pattern. He'd seen it on his mother's face 2 decades ago, back when his father still lived long enough to regret it. One Friday afternoon, Kael stopped by Margaret's office unannounced. "How's the new hire?" Margaret glanced up from her computer, eyebrows raised. "Vale? Competent, quiet, doesn't cause problems." "Any issues?" "She leaves exactly at 5 every day. Won't stay late, won't come early if asked. But her work's clean." Margaret paused. "Why?" Kael didn't answer. Margaret leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You want me to keep an eye on her?" "No." "Then what?" Kael turned toward the door. "Just asking." But Margaret had worked for him long enough to read between the lines. "If she's in trouble, she's not your concern." "Understood." Kael left before the conversation could go further. Because Margaret was wrong. Celine wasn't in trouble. She was drowning. The breaking point came on a Wednesday in late November. Celine had been working at Varelli Holdings for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of waking up at 5 a.m., 6 weeks of smiling through split lips and pretending her ribs didn't scream every time she bent over a filing cabinet. 6 weeks of returning home to Damien's unpredictable moods, sometimes tender, sometimes violent, always suffocating. That morning, Noah had spilled juice on the kitchen floor. It was an accident. The boy was 4 years old, still learning coordination, still figuring out how to hold cups without dropping them. But Damien had been awake, and Damien had been drinking. The slap came fast, open-palmed across Noah's cheek, hard enough to knock the child sideways into the refrigerator. Noah's head cracked against the metal handle. Blood welled immediately, a thin line above his eyebrow. The boy didn't cry. He just stared. Celine moved without thinking, scooping Noah into her arms and backing toward the bathroom. Damien followed, shouting about respect, about consequences, about how she was raising a weak son. She locked the bathroom door, pressed a towel against Noah's bleeding forehead, whispered that everything would be okay, lied. Damien pounded on the door for 10 minutes before giving up. Eventually, his footsteps retreated. The apartment went quiet. Celine sat on the bathroom floor holding her son and felt something inside her finally crack. Not break. Crack. Because she'd survived 4 years of this, 4 years of bruises and apologies, and the twisted logic that insisted he only hurt her because he loved her, 4 years of telling herself it would get better, that he'd change, that leaving would be worse. But Noah's blood on her hands rewrote every calculation. Her son would grow up believing this was normal, that fathers hit, that mothers endured, that love was supposed to hurt. And Celine realized, with a clarity that felt like drowning, that she had to leave. Not for herself, for him. Back. That afternoon at work, Celine moved through her tasks like a ghost. She filed documents incorrectly, missed 3 phone calls, stared at spreadsheets without processing a single number. At 4:47 p.m., someone knocked on her office door. Celine looked up. Kyle Virelli stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. She scrambled to her feet. "Mr. Virelli, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were—" "Sit." She sat. Kyle stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He didn't sit, didn't move closer, just stood there, studying her with the same unnerving intensity from the interview. "You're hurt," he said. Not a question. Celine's breath caught. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Her hands twisted together in her lap. "I don't know what you—" "Someone's hurting you." The words landed like a physical blow. Celine opened her mouth, closed it. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. Every survival instinct screamed at her to deny, deflect, smile, perform. But the weight of Noah's blood on her hands that morning made the lies impossible. "I can handle it," she whispered. Cale's jaw tightened. "That's not what I asked." Silence. Then so quietly she almost didn't hear it. "Is it your boyfriend?" Celine's eyes filled with tears. She didn't nod, didn't confirm. But her silence answered everything. Kyle exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. For a moment he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man trying not to break something. "I can help," he said finally. "No." The word came out sharp, panicked. "You can't. He'll—" She stopped herself. "He'll what?" Celine shook her head, standing abruptly. "I appreciate the concern, Mr. Virelli, but I'm fine. Really. I had a rough morning. It won't happen again." Kyle didn't move. "If you need anything, I don't." She grabbed her coat, her bag, and walked past him without meeting his eyes. Kyle watched her go. And for the first time in 20 years, the man who controlled an empire through fear and discipline felt utterly, completely powerless. That night, Kyle sat in his penthouse office overlooking Hartford, nursing a glass of whiskey he hadn't touched. On his desk sat a manila folder. Inside, Damien Cross's entire life, documented in clinical detail. Dante had pulled the file within an hour of Kyle's request. Criminal record, petty theft, assault, possession. Employment history, spotty at best. Current status, unemployed for 8 months. Address, East Hartford, 2nd floor, apartment 2C. Kyle stared at the surveillance photo clipped to the first page. Damien looked ordinary, handsome even, the kind of man who charmed bartenders and smiled at strangers, the kind of man who broke women behind closed doors. Kale's phone buzzed. "Dante, you want me to handle it?" 3 words. That's all it would take. 1 phone call, and Damien Cross would disappear, cleanly, quietly, permanently. Kale's thumb hovered over the screen. Then he thought about Celine's face in his office. The way she'd flinched when he offered help. The terror beneath her refusal. She wasn't ready. And if Kyle moved too fast, she'd run, not from Damien, but from him. He set the phone down. "Kale, no, not yet." "Dante, you're going soft." Kale, "I'm being smart." "Dante, same thing." Kale didn't respond. Instead, he opened his laptop and began drafting emails. To lawyers, counselors, shelter coordinators, people who owed him favors and understood silence. He couldn't force Celine to leave, but he could build an escape route around her, and when she was finally ready to run, every door would already be open. 3 weeks passed. Celine continued showing up, continued working, continued leaving at 5:01 p.m. But something had shifted. Kale saw it in the way she held herself, straighter now, less apologetic. In the way she started eating lunch in the break room instead of alone. In the way she asked Margaret questions instead of suffering in silence. Small changes. Fragile changes. But changes. Then, on a frozen December night, Kael's phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Unknown number. He answered. "I need to leave." Celine's voice, barely a whisper, shaking so hard he almost didn't recognize it. Kael sat up immediately, already reaching for his jacket. "Where are you?" "Bathroom. He's asleep. I don't have much time." "Are you hurt?" "Noah is." Her voice cracked. He pushed him. Into the table. "There's blood." "Listen to me." Kael's voice dropped into something calm, controlled, the tone he used when negotiations turned violent. "I'm sending a car. It'll be outside your building in 8 minutes. Take only what you can carry. Documents, clothes, nothing else. Understand?" "I'm scared." "I know." "What if he wakes up?" "He won't." "But if he does?" "Celine." Kael's voice cut through her panic like a blade. "Do you trust me?" Silence. Then, "Yes." "Then move." The line went dead. Kael was already dialing Dante. "I need a car in East Hartford, now. Apartment 2C, second floor, woman and a child. Bring them to the safe house on Laurel Street." Dante didn't ask questions. "On it." Kael grabbed his keys, his gun, and headed for the door. Because tonight, the Mafia Boss who'd spent 20 years building an empire on control was about to risk everything for a woman he barely knew. And he didn't care. The car arrived in 7 minutes. Celine heard the engine idling outside her building as she stood in the bathroom, Noah pressed against her chest, his small body shaking. The shower ran at full blast, masking the sound of her ragged breathing. In her hands, a canvas bag stuffed with birth certificates, Noah's stuffed rabbit, 2 changes of clothes, and the emergency cash she'd been hiding in a tampon box for 3 months. $57. Everything she owned that Damien didn't control. Through the thin bathroom door, she heard him snoring in the bedroom, deep, rhythmic, the sound of someone drunk enough to sleep through anything. But Celine knew better than to trust it. Damien had a sixth sense for her movements, like he could smell her thoughts before she acted on them. Noah whimpered against her shoulder. "Shh, baby," Celine whispered, her lips against his hair. "We're going somewhere safe." "Daddy gonna be mad." The words gutted her. Because Noah was right. Damien would be furious. Damien would hunt them. Damien would call her phone 17 times in an hour, leave voicemails that swung between apologies and threats, show up at her work, manipulate her mother, weaponize guilt until she questioned everything. But Noah's forehead still bled beneath the makeshift bandage she'd wrapped around it. And that blood rewrote every equation. Celine turned off the shower. The silence felt deafening. She eased the bathroom door open, moving with the practiced silence of someone who'd learned to navigate a minefield. The apartment was dark except for the glow from the bedroom television. She could see Damien's shape beneath the blankets, one arm thrown over his face, chest rising and falling. She took 1 step, 2, 3. The floorboard creaked. Damien stirred, mumbling something incoherent. Celine froze, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard she thought it might break through. Noah's fingers dug into her neck. For 5 eternal seconds she stood perfectly still, barely breathing. Damien rolled over, facing the wall. Celine moved. She crossed the living room in 8 silent steps, grabbed her coat from the hook, and unlocked the front door with trembling hands. The hallway beyond was empty, fluorescent lights flickering overhead. She could hear a television blaring from the apartment below, smell someone's burned dinner seeping through the walls. She didn't look back. Couldn't. Because if she looked back, she'd see the life she was abandoning. The couch they'd bought together, the photographs on the wall, the coffee mug Damien used every morning. The evidence that they'd once been happy, or at least that she'd convinced herself they were. Outside, the December air hit her like a slap. A black sedan waited at the curb, engine running, windows tinted dark enough to hide whoever sat inside. The back door opened. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing an expensive suit that didn't match the neighborhood. He had the kind of face that said he'd seen violence and participated willingly. Celine Vale. She nodded. I'm Marco. Mr. Varelli sent me. He gestured toward the car. Get in. Celine hesitated, suddenly aware of how insane this was. She was climbing into a stranger's car in the middle of the night with her bleeding son, running from one dangerous man straight into the arms of another. But Marco's expression softened when he saw Noah. The kid needs a hospital? No? Celine's voice came out harder than she intended. No hospitals. They ask questions. Marco understood immediately. There's a doctor at the safe house, former ER. She'll take care of him. Celine climbed into the car. The door closed behind her with a solid thunk, sealing her inside leather seats and tinted glass. The driver, another man in a dark suit, pulled away from the curb without a word. Celine watched her apartment building disappear through the rear window, watched the flickering porch light fade into darkness, watched the only home Noah had ever known vanish like it never existed. And for the first time in 4 years, she didn't feel relief. She felt terror. Tumults. The safe house sat on Laurel Street, tucked between a bodega and a laundromat that had been closed for months. From the outside, it looked abandoned, cracked windows, peeling paint, the kind of building you walked past without noticing. Inside was different. The door opened into a small apartment with clean furniture, working heat, and blackout curtains covering every window. A woman in her 40s stood in the kitchen, dark hair pulled back, medical bag open on the counter. I'm Dr. Sarah Lim, she said, her voice calm and clinical. Bring him here. Celine carried Noah to the kitchen table. The boy had stopped crying 20 minutes ago, gone quiet in that terrible way that meant he'd retreated somewhere inside himself. Dr. Lim examined the cut on his forehead with gentle hands, her expression neutral. It's not deep, she said finally. Won't need stitches, but he might have a mild concussion. I'll monitor him tonight. She glanced at Celine. What about you? I'm fine. Dr. Lim's eyes moved over Celine's face, her wrists, the way she held herself. That's not what I asked. Celine's throat tightened. I said, I'm fine. For a moment, Dr. Lim looked like she might push. Then she nodded. There's food in the fridge, clean clothes in the bedroom, bathroom stocked. You're safe here. For how long? As long as you need. Celine wanted to believe her. She didn't. Sunset. Kale arrived an hour later. Celine was sitting on the couch, Noah asleep in her lap, when she heard the key turn in the lock. Her entire body went rigid, every instinct screaming danger. But when the door opened, it wasn't Damien. It was Kyle Varelli. He looked different outside the office. No suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled. But his eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, seeing everything she tried to hide. Dr. Lim stood. The boy's stable. Minor head trauma. No serious injury. I'll check on him again in a few hours. Kale nodded. Thank you, Sarah. The doctor left, closing the door quietly behind her. Kale turned to Celine. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to process the fact that her boss, a man she barely knew, had orchestrated her escape in the middle of the night like some kind of covert operation. Why are you doing this? She asked finally. Kale sat down in the chair across from her, keeping distance between them. Because you needed help. You don't even know me. I know enough. Celine's hands tightened around Noah's sleeping form. What do you want? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Because men like Kyle Varelli didn't help people for free. There was always a price. Kale's expression didn't change. I want you safe. Why? Does it matter? Yes. Silence. Then Kale leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time Celine saw something raw beneath his carefully controlled exterior. My mother spent 15 years married to a man who broke her bones and called it love, he said quietly. By the time she finally left, she was so beaten down she didn't recognize herself anymore. She died 3 years later, heart attack, the doctors said. But I knew the truth. His jaw tightened. Fear killed her, the kind of fear that burrows into your chest and never leaves. Celine's breath caught. I was 17, Kyle continued, and I promised myself that if I ever had the power to stop it happening to someone else, I would. He met her eyes. So that's why. No conditions, no expectations. You're not a transaction. Celine didn't realize she was crying until a tear hit Noah's hair. I don't know what to do, she whispered. You already did it. You left. He's going to look for me. I know. He won't stop. Neither will I. The certainty in Kael's voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her. Because Celine had spent 4 years learning that men who promise protection usually just wanted control by another name. What happens now? She asked. Kael stood. Now you sleep. Tomorrow we talk to a lawyer. Get a restraining order filed. Start custody proceedings. One step at a time. And if Damien finds this place, he won't. But if he does, Celine, Kael's voice dropped into something cold and absolute. He won't. Celine wanted to argue. Wanted to explain that Damien was relentless, obsessive, the kind of man who saw her as property he'd purchased with 4 years of manipulation, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She nodded. Kael walked to the door, then paused. You did the right thing. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. He opened the door. Get some rest. Marco's outside if you need anything. Then he was gone. Celine sat in the silent apartment holding her sleeping son and tried to believe that leaving was the right choice. She failed. Damien woke up at 6:43 a.m. to an empty apartment. At first, he didn't notice. He stumbled into the kitchen, scratching his stomach, expecting to find Celine making coffee. Instead, he found dishes in the sink, a half-empty juice carton on the counter, and silence. Cell? No answer. He checked the bathroom. Empty. The bedroom. Empty. Noah's room. Empty. The bed still made. That's when he saw the open closet. Missing clothes? Missing shoes. The canvas bag she kept on the top shelf, gone. Damien's chest tightened. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number with shaking hands. It rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. Hey, it's me. Where are you? Call me back. He tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Panic crawled up his spine, cold and sharp. He checked the bathroom again, looking for evidence. Her toothbrush. Gone. Noah's stuffed rabbit. Gone. The cheap makeup she kept in a plastic bag beneath the sink. Gone. No. Damien punched the wall hard enough to split his knuckles. Pain flared bright and hot, but he barely felt it. She left. She actually fucking left. He called her mother. Hello? Linda, it's Damien. Is Celine there? A pause. Why would she be here? She's not answering her phone. I thought maybe... We haven't spoken in 2 months, Damien. You know that. Because he'd isolated Celine so completely, even her own mother couldn't reach her anymore. If you hear from her, I won't. Linda hung up. Damien stared at his phone, breathing hard. His mind raced through possibilities, calculations, strategies. Celine wasn't smart enough to run without help. Someone was helping her. Someone gave her money, a place to stay, advice. He pulled up her recent calls. Nothing unusual. Checked her email. She didn't have a password because he'd never allowed her privacy. One unread message from Varelli Holdings HR. Reminder, benefits enrollment closes Friday. Varelli Holdings, her job. Damien remembered the way she'd looked when she came home after that interview. Hopeful, excited, like she'd found something that belonged to her. He grabbed his keys. At 9:15 a.m., Damien walked into the Varelli Holdings lobby wearing his cleanest jeans and the button-down shirt Celine had ironed for him last week. The security guard looked up. Can I help you? I'm looking for Celine Vale. She works here. Is she expecting you? I'm her boyfriend. The guard's expression didn't change. I'll need to see ID and check with her before you go up. Damien forced a smile. Sure, no problem. He handed over his license. The guard made a phone call, spoke quietly into the receiver, then hung up. She's not available right now. You'll have to... Just call her again. Tell her it's important. Sir, it's about our son. The guard hesitated, made another call. This time, the conversation lasted longer. When he hung up, his expression had shifted into something harder. Ms. Vale isn't in the office today. You'll need to leave. Damien's hands curled into fists. That's bullshit. I know she's here. Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. I want to see my girlfriend. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. For a moment, Damien considered pushing, considered making a scene, demanding answers, forcing his way upstairs, but he wasn't stupid. He left, stood outside on the sidewalk, staring up at the glass tower, and felt rage coil tight in his chest. Someone in that building knew where Celine was, and Damien was going to find out who. Igich. Inside, 14 floors up, Margaret Chen stood in Kael's office with her arms crossed. Security just called. Celine's boyfriend showed up looking for her. Kael didn't look up from his laptop. What did they tell him? That she wasn't available. He left. Did he cause a scene? No, but he will. Kael closed the laptop. Increase lobby security. Make sure his photos circulated. If he comes back, I want to know immediately. Margaret studied him carefully. Kael, what exactly are we doing here? Keeping an employee safe. We both know this is more than that. Kael met her eyes. Is it a problem? That depends. Are we running a business or a witness protection program? Both. Margaret exhaled slowly. You're playing a dangerous game. Men like Damien Cross don't just give up. And if he figures out you're involved, let him. You can't solve every problem with intimidation. Watch me. Margaret shook her head. Your mother would have hated this. Kael's expression went cold. My mother would have understood exactly why I'm doing it. Margaret held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. But when this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you. She left. Kael returned to his laptop, pulling up the security footage from the lobby. He watched Damien Cross stand outside the building for 12 minutes, pacing, making phone calls, staring up at the windows like he could see through glass and steel. Then Damien got into a rusted pickup truck and drove away. Kael made a note of the license plate. Then he called Dante. I need surveillance on Damien Cross, 24 hours. I want to know everywhere he goes, everyone he talks to, every move he makes. You're getting personally involved, Dante said flatly. I'm protecting an asset. You're protecting a woman. There's a difference. Kael's jaw tightened. Just do it. Dante sighed. Already on it. But Kael? What? This doesn't end clean. You know that, right? Kael hung up. Celine spent the first 3 days in the safe house convinced Damien would find her. Every footstep in the hallway outside made her flinch. Every car door slamming on the street sent her pulse racing. She slept in 2-hour increments, always half awake, always listening. Dr. Lim checked on Noah twice daily. The cut on his forehead was healing well, no signs of infection, no lingering symptoms of concussion. But the boy had stopped talking almost entirely. He wouldn't eat unless Celine fed him by hand, wouldn't sleep unless she lay down beside him, wouldn't let her out of his sight for more than 30 seconds without panicking. It's regression, Dr. Lim explained gently. Trauma response. He'll come back, but it takes time. Celine nodded like she understood. She didn't, because watching her son retreat into silence felt like watching her own failure play out in real time. On the 4th day, a lawyer arrived. Her name was Patricia Rourke, early 50s, gray hair cut short, eyes that had seen enough courtroom battles to be unimpressed by anything. She carried a briefcase that looked older than Celine and spoke with the clipped efficiency of someone who billed by the 6-minute increment. I've been retained by Varelli Holdings to represent you in custody and domestic violence proceedings, Patricia said, pulling out a stack of documents. First step, restraining order. I need details. When did the abuse start? Frequency? Witnesses? Documentation? Celine sat across from her at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee. 4 years ago, she said quietly. It started small, yelling, punching walls. Then he grabbed my arm hard enough to bruise. I thought it was an accident. She laughed bitterly. I kept thinking it was an accident. Patricia wrote quickly, her pen scratching across legal pads. Physical violence? Yes. Sexual? Celine's throat closed. Sometimes. Did you ever report it? No. Why not? Because he told me no one would believe me. Because I didn't have anywhere to go. Because I thought I could fix it. Patricia looked up, her expression softening slightly. You understand those aren't failures, right? You survived. That's what matters. Celine wanted to believe her. She didn't. Patricia continued documenting everything. The broken ribs, the black eyes, the time Damien choked her unconscious in front of Noah, the night he locked her outside in January until hypothermia set in. Every memory Celine had buried came flooding back, raw and visceral. 2 hours later, Patricia closed her briefcase. I'll file the restraining order tomorrow morning. Emergency custody petition goes in simultaneously. Connecticut law favors protecting children from domestic violence exposure, so we have a strong case. She paused. But you need to understand something. Damien will fight this. Men like him don't accept losing control. He'll violate the restraining order. He'll call you, show up at your work, manipulate family members. Are you prepared for that? Celine's hands trembled. I don't know. Then get prepared, because the hardest part isn't leaving, it's staying gone. Damien violated the restraining order 7 hours after it was served. Celine's phone rang at 11:34 p.m. She was lying in bed, Noah curled against her side, when the screen lit up with Damien's name. Her entire body went rigid. She didn't answer. It rang again. Again. Then the voicemails started. Baby, please, just talk to me. I don't understand what happened. We can fix this. You can't just take my son. That's kidnapping, Cel. You know that, right? You're breaking the law. I'm sorry. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Just come home. You fucking bitch. You think you can run? I'll find you. I swear to God, I'll find you. 17 calls in 90 minutes. Each voicemail, a different version of Damien. Loving, desperate, angry, manipulative. The emotional whiplash was so familiar it made Celine's stomach turn. On the 18th call, she answered, Stop calling me. Celine, Damien's voice cracked. Thank God, I've been losing my mind. Where are you? Somewhere you can't find me. Baby, don't say that. Just tell me what I did wrong. I'll fix it. I swear I'll fix it. Celine closed her eyes. You hurt Noah. Silence. Then, that was an accident. He fell. You know how clumsy he is. You pushed him. I didn't. I saw you. Damien's tone shifted, hardening. You're remembering it wrong. You always do that. You twist things until... Don't. Don't what? Don't gaslight me. I know what happened. A bitter laugh. Gaslight? Where'd you learn that word? Someone been filling your head with psychology bullshit? That lawyer, your boss? Celine's pulse spiked. How do you know about my boss? I'm not stupid, Cel. You think I don't know someone's helping you? Men like Cale Varelli don't give a shit about people like us unless they want something. His voice dropped into something ugly. What's he getting from you? This conversation is over. You're fucking him, aren't you? Celine hung up. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the phone. It clattered against the floor, screen cracking. Noah stirred beside her, whimpering. It's okay, baby, Celine whispered, pulling him closer. It's okay. But it wasn't, because Damien knew about Kyle, and that meant he was watching. Oshit. The next morning, Kyle arrived at the safe house at 7 a.m. with coffee and bagels. Celine met him at the door, looking like she hadn't slept. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hair hung limp around her face. She wore the same clothes from yesterday. He called, she said without preamble. Cale's expression went cold. How many times? 17. Then I answered. Why? Because he wasn't going to stop. Kyle set the coffee down on the kitchen counter, his movements controlled but radiating tension. What did he say? Celine repeated the conversation, her voice flat and mechanical. When she mentioned Kyle's name, she watched his reaction carefully. His jaw tightened. He's fishing, trying to figure out who's helping you so he can target them. Is that why you're here? To protect your investment? The question came out harsher than she intended. Cale turned to face her fully. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what to think. Celine wrapped her arms around herself. I don't know you. I don't know why you're doing this. And every time I try to figure it out, Her voice cracked. I'm so tired of being someone's project. Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My mother's name was Elena. She married my father when she was 19 because her parents told her he was a good man with a steady job. For 15 years, he came home drunk and beat her unconscious. Neighbors heard her screaming, friends saw the bruises. No one did anything. Celine's breath caught. I was 7 the first time I tried to stop him, Kyle continued. He broke 3 of my ribs and told me real men don't interfere. By the time I was big enough to fight back, my mother was too broken to leave. She died when I was 20. Heart failure, officially. But we both know fear killed her years before her body gave out. He met Celine's eyes. So no, you're not a project. You're the chance I never got to give my mother. And if that makes me selfish, I don't care. Celine felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be. Just stay alive. The restraining order worked for exactly 4 days. On day 5, Damien showed up at Celine's mother's house. Linda Vale opened the door to find her daughter's ex-boyfriend standing on the porch, looking disheveled and desperate. She hadn't seen Damien in months. Celine had stopped bringing him around after Linda asked too many questions about Bruises. I need to talk to Celine, Damien said. She's not here. But you know where she is. Linda crossed her arms. Even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. Damien's expression crumpled. Please, I just want to see my son. She's keeping him from me. Maybe there's a reason for that. I never hurt him. Linda's eyes hardened. But you hurt her. Damien flinched like he'd been slapped. For a moment, he looked genuinely devastated. Eyes red, shoulders slumped, the picture of a broken man. Then his mask slipped. You don't know what you're talking about, he said coldly. Celine's a liar. She always has been. Makes herself the victim so people feel sorry for her. Get off my property. Tell her I came by. Tell her I'm not giving up. I'm calling the police. Damien held up both hands, backing away. Fine. But when she comes crawling back, and she will, don't act surprised. He left. Linda called Celine immediately. He was here, at my house. Celine's blood went cold. What did he want? To scare me. And it worked. Linda's voice shook. Honey, you need to be careful. That man isn't right. I know. Do you? Because for 4 years you defended him, lied for him, made excuses. Mom, I'm not judging. I'm just saying. Don't go back. Whatever he promises, don't believe him. Celine closed her eyes. I won't. But even as she said it, part of her wasn't sure. But the custody hearing was scheduled for January 15th, 6 weeks after Celine left. 6 weeks of living in the safe house, working remotely for Betrayal Holdings, attending therapy sessions with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence survivors. 6 weeks of Damien's relentless campaign to pull her back. He sent flowers to her mother's house with cards that said, I love you. He created fake social media accounts to message her friends, asking about her whereabouts. He showed up at Noah's old daycare claiming he had custody and demanding to see his son. He called Betrayal Holdings 17 times asking to speak with Celine, until Kyle personally called him back and delivered a message so cold and absolute that Damien didn't call again. But the psychological warfare worked. Celine started doubting herself. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe the violence wasn't as bad as she remembered. Maybe Damien really had changed. Maybe she was destroying their family over something fixable. Trauma did that. Rewrote memories, softened edges, made abuse look like love from the right angle. Her therapist warned her about it. It's called traumatic bonding, Dr. Michaels explained during one session. Your brain associates him with survival. 4 years of conditioning doesn't disappear because you left. You're going to miss him, crave him, question everything. That's normal. It doesn't feel normal, Celine whispered. It feels like withdrawal. Because it is. Celine stared at the ceiling. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm the problem? Did he ever hit you? Yes. Choke you? Yes. Force you sexually? Celine's throat closed. Yes. Then you're not wrong. You're traumatized. But knowing it intellectually didn't stop her from reaching for her phone at night, typing out messages to Damien, then deleting them before hitting send. I'm sorry. Maybe we can try again. I miss you. She never sent them, but she wanted to, and that terrified her more than anything else. Right. 3 days before the custody hearing, Kale found Celine sitting in the safe house living room at 2 a.m., staring at her phone. Can't sleep? he asked. She jumped, nearly dropping the phone. You scared me. Sorry. He sat down in the chair across from her, keeping distance. Want to talk about it? Not really. Talk anyway. Celine set the phone down. I keep thinking about the good times, the way he'd apologize after, how he'd hold me and cry and promise it would never happen again, the dinners he'd cook, the way he'd play with Noah. Her voice cracked. It wasn't all bad. It never is, Kael said quietly. That's what makes it so hard to leave. If it was all bad, the decision would be easy. But abusers are smart. They give you just enough good to make you doubt the bad. How do you know that? Because I watched my father do it to my mother for 15 years. Every time she tried to leave, he'd transform into the man she married. Flowers, apologies, promises, and every time she believed him because she wanted to. Celine wiped her eyes. I don't want to be that weak. You're not weak, you're human. I almost called him tonight. Kael didn't react. But you didn't. Because I'm scared of what I'd say if he answered. What would you say? That I want to come home. The admission hung between them, raw and devastating. Kael leaned forward. If you go back, he'll kill you. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But eventually, one of those punches will land wrong. One of those chokeholds will last too long. And Noah will be the one finding your body. Celine flinched. I'm not trying to scare you, Kael continued, his voice gentler. I'm trying to remind you why you left. Because trauma makes you forget, makes you focus on the apologies instead of the violence. But the violence is what's real. The apologies are just intermissions. Celine stared at him. You sound like you've said this before. I have. To my mother. 3 weeks before she died. Kael's jaw tightened. She didn't listen. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be alive. Celine nodded slowly. Then she picked up her phone, opened her blocked contacts, and showed Kael the screen. Damien's number. I need you to delete this for me, she whispered, because I don't trust myself not to unblock it. Kael took the phone, and without hesitation, he deleted Damien Cross from her life. The day of the custody hearing arrived cold and brutal. Celine stood outside the courthouse at 8:45 a.m., wearing a donated blazer that didn't quite fit and shoes that pinched her toes. Patricia Rourke stood beside her, briefcase in hand, reviewing notes. Remember, Patricia said, answer questions directly. Don't elaborate. Don't get emotional. The judge wants facts, not drama. What if I see him and freeze? Then you breathe. You remember why you're here, and you focus on Noah. Celine nodded. They walked inside. The courthouse smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Lawyers and families crowded the hallways, speaking in hushed tones. Celine felt like she was walking through water, every movement slow and surreal. Then she saw him. Damien stood near the courtroom entrance, wearing a clean suit she'd never seen before. His hair was trimmed, his face was shaved. He looked like the man she'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. Charming, handsome, safe. Their eyes met. Celine's pulse skyrocketed. Her hands started shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to run, not from him, but to him. Damien smiled, not cruel, not manipulative, genuinely warm, like none of it had ever happened. And for one terrible second, Celine wanted to believe him. Then Noah's voice echoed in her memory. Daddy gonna be mad. And she remembered the blood on her son's forehead. Celine walked past Damien without looking back. Inside the courtroom, the judge, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie 100 times, reviewed the case files while both lawyers presented opening statements. Patricia was efficient, clinical, devastating. She presented medical records documenting injuries, photos of bruises, testimony from Dr. Lim about Noah's head wound, a recording of one of Damien's voicemails where he threatened to make her regret this. Damien's lawyer, a young man in an ill-fitting suit who looked fresh out of law school, argued that Celine was an unfit mother who'd abandoned the home, kidnapped the child, and fabricated abuse allegations to gain custody. The judge listened without expression. Then she called Celine to the stand. Celine walked to the witness box on shaking legs. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Patricia began the questioning. Ms. Vale, can you describe the nature of your relationship with Mr. Cross? Celine's voice came out steady. We were together for 4 years. We have a son, Noah. During those 4 years, did Mr. Cross ever physically harm you? Yes. Can you provide examples? Celine swallowed hard. He punched me, choked me, shoved me into walls, broke my ribs twice. Did you ever seek medical treatment? Once. He told the doctors I fell down the stairs. Did you correct them? No. Why not? Because I was afraid. Patricia nodded. And on the night you left, what happened? Celine's hands clenched in her lap. Damien pushed Noah during an argument. Noah hit his head on the table and started bleeding. That's when I knew I had to leave. No further questions. Damien's lawyer stood. Miss Vale, isn't it true that you suffer from anxiety and depression? Yes. And isn't it possible that your mental health issues caused you to misinterpret normal domestic arguments as abuse? Celine's chest tightened. No. But you admit you have a distorted perception of reality. Objection, Patricia snapped. Argumentative. Sustained. The lawyer tried again. Ms. Vale, did Mr. Cross ever prevent you from leaving the house? Yes. Did he lock you in? No, but he took my keys, my phone. He controlled where I went and who I saw. So you could have left at any time. Celine's voice hardened. Have you ever been terrified of someone you love? The lawyer blinked. That's not... Have you ever weighed whether running would get you killed faster than staying? Celine leaned forward. Because I did. Every single day. And I stayed because I thought it was safer. I was wrong. The courtroom went silent. The judge made a note. Damien's lawyer sat down. Finally, the judge spoke. I'm granting temporary sole custody to Ms. Vale pending a full custody evaluation. Mr. Cross will have supervised visitation rights 2 hours per week at an approved facility. A permanent hearing will be scheduled in 60 days. The gavel struck. Celine felt her knees buckle. She'd won. Not permanently, not completely. But she'd won. Patricia gripped her arm. Breathe, you did it. Celine turned to leave the courtroom and found Damien blocking the aisle. He stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, close enough that her body reacted instinctively, racing heart, shallow breathing, muscle memory preparing for violence. This isn't over, he whispered. Before Celine could respond, a hand landed on Damien's shoulder. Kael Virelli stood behind him, expression carved from ice. Yes, Kael said quietly. It is. Damien turned, recognizing him immediately. You. Move. For a moment, the two men stared at each other, Damien's desperation colliding with Kael's absolute certainty. Then Damien stepped aside. Kael guided Celine out of the courtroom, his hand steady on her back. Behind them, Damien watched with eyes that burned with something far more dangerous than anger. Obsession. That night, Celine sat in the safe house with Noah asleep beside her, staring at the custody order on the coffee table. She'd won. She was free. So why did she feel like she was drowning? Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. You think you're safe, Damien's voice whispered. You think he can protect you. But you're mine, Celine. You've always been mine, and I'm going to prove it. The line went dead. Celine sat in the darkness, her son's breathing the only sound, and realized with absolute clarity that the hardest part wasn't leaving. It was surviving what came next. Celine didn't sleep that night. She sat on the couch in the safe house, phone clutched in her hand, replaying Damien's whispered threat over and over until the words lost meaning and became just sound. Noah slept beside her, curled into a ball beneath a donated blanket, his breathing soft and rhythmic. Every car that passed outside made her flinch. Every creak of the building settling sent her pulse spiking. You're mine, Celine. You've always been mine. At 4:17 a.m., she finally called Kael. He answered on the second ring, voice alert despite the hour. What happened? He called. Celine's voice shook. Unknown number, he said you can't protect me. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm coming over. It's 4 in the morning. I'm already dressed. 20 minutes later, Kael arrived with Marco, his face carved from stone. Celine met them at the door, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Eyes red from crying she refused to admit to. Kael stepped inside, scanning the apartment like he expected to find Damien hiding in the shadows. Tell me exactly what he said. Celine repeated the conversation word for word. When she finished, Kael pulled out his phone and made a call. Dante, I need a trace on an incoming call to Celine's number. Timestamp 11:47 p.m. He listened. I don't care if it's a burner. Find out where it pinged from. He hung up. Can you do that? Celine asked. I can do a lot of things. Kael turned to Marco. Double security on this location. I want eyes on every entrance, 24 hours. Marco nodded and stepped outside. Celine wrapped her arms around herself. He's not going to stop. No, Kael agreed. He's not. Then what do we do? Kael was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he said, we wait for him to make a mistake. And when he does, we end this. The certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it sounded like a promise of violence. 3 days later, Dante found the mistake. Kael was in his office reviewing quarterly projections when Dante walked in without knocking, laptop in hand. Got something, Dante said, setting the laptop on Kael's desk. On screen, surveillance footage from a gas station in East Hartford, time-stamped 2 nights ago. A man in a baseball cap pumped gas into a rusted pickup truck, then walked inside to pay. The camera caught his face for exactly 3 seconds. Damien Cross. He used a credit card, Dante continued. Stolen, reported missing 4 days ago by a woman in West Hartford. Same card was used at a liquor store on Farmington Avenue and a motel on Berlin Turnpike. Kael leaned forward. Which motel? Starlight Inn. Paid cash for a week. Clerk remembers him because he asked if they had long-term rates. Dante pulled up another image. Grainy footage of Damien entering room 23. He's been there since the custody hearing. Kael studied the screen. The motel was a dive. Cracked parking lot, flickering neon sign. The kind of place that rented by the hour and didn't ask questions. Less than 4 miles from the safe house. He's hunting, Kael said quietly. Yeah, and he's getting closer. Found this in his truck's GPS history. Dante pulled up a map with several red pins. He's been driving past Varelli Holdings, your penthouse building, Linda Vale's house, 3 different women's shelters. He's running a grid search. Kael's jaw tightened. How long before he finds the safe house? If he's smart, week, maybe 2. If he gets lucky? Dante shrugged. Could be tomorrow. Kael stood, buttoning his jacket. I want that motel under surveillance. Who he talks to, where he goes, every move. Already done. But Kael... Dante hesitated. This guy's unraveling. Desperate men do stupid things. If he finds her before we're ready, he won't. You don't know that. Kael met Dante's eyes. Then we make sure we're ready first. That afternoon, Kael arrived at the safe house to find Celine teaching Noah how to tie his shoes. The boy sat on the floor, tongue between his teeth, concentrating fiercely as he looped the laces. Celine knelt beside him, patient and gentle, guiding his small fingers. When Noah finally managed a lopsided knot, he looked up at his mother with such pure joy that something tightened in Kael's chest. Good job, baby, Celine said, kissing his forehead. Noah noticed Kael standing in the doorway. The boy's expression shuddered immediately, and he pressed closer to his mother. It's okay, Celine murmured. This is Mr. Kael. He's a friend. Kael crouched down, making himself smaller. Hey, Noah, those are some good-looking knots. Noah didn't respond. Kael didn't push. He'd seen enough traumatized kids to know they needed space and time, not forced interaction. Celine stood, smoothing down her jeans. Did something happen? We need to talk, privately. Celine glanced at Noah, then at Dr. Lim, who'd appeared from the kitchen. The doctor nodded, understanding immediately. Come on, Noah, Dr. Lim said. Let's see if we can find that dinosaur puzzle. Noah hesitated, looking at his mother. I'll be right here, Celine promised. The boy followed Dr. Lim into the bedroom, glancing back twice. Once the door closed, Celine turned to Kael. What's wrong? Cale told her about the motel, the surveillance, the grid search. With every word, Celine's face went paler. "He's going to find us," she whispered. "Not if we move you first." "Move where?" "Somewhere Damien can't reach. Out of state, if necessary." Celine shook her head violently. "No, I have a job. Noah has therapy. I can't just disappear." "You can work remotely. We'll arrange therapy wherever you go." "For how long? A month? A year? Forever?" Celine's voice rose. "I'm not spending the rest of my life running from him." "Then what do you want to do?" "I don't know." The words came out raw, desperate. "I don't know how to make this stop. I don't know how to keep my son safe. I don't know anything anymore." Cale stepped closer, his voice dropping. "You want me to make him disappear." The offer hung between them, explicit and terrible. Celine stared at him. "What?" "One phone call. Damien Cross becomes a missing person. No body, no evidence, just gone." Celine's breath caught. "You're serious?" "Completely. That's murder. That's protection." Celine backed away, shaking her head. "But no, I didn't leave Damien just to let you—" She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. "I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." "Why?" Celine looked up, tears streaming down her face. "Why would you risk that for me?" Cale was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Because if I'd had the power when I was 17, my father wouldn't have lived to see 18, and my mother would still be alive." The honesty in his voice was devastating. Celine wiped her eyes. "I can't. I won't. There has to be another way." Kyle nodded slowly, though his expression suggested he didn't believe her. "Then we keep you safe until we find it." The next 48 hours passed in tense silence. Kyle increased security around the safe house. Marco stationed himself outside. 2 additional men took shifts watching the street. Celine wasn't allowed to leave except for therapy appointments, and even those required a 3-car escort. Noah sensed the tension and regressed further. He stopped eating solid food, started having nightmares, refused to be more than 3 feet from his mother at any time. Dr. Michaels, Celine's therapist, pulled her aside after their Wednesday session. "He's internalizing your fear," Dr. Michaels said gently. "Children that age are emotional sponges. He feels your panic even when you hide it. I don't know how to stop being afraid." "You don't have to stop. You just have to manage it, for his sake." But managing fear was impossible when every shadow looked like Damien, every phone call felt like a threat, every knock on the door sent her pulse racing. On Thursday night, Celine's phone rang at 9:34 p.m. Linda Vale. "Mom?" "Honey?" Linda's voice trembled. "Damien was here again." Celine's blood went cold. "When?" "An hour ago. He said he just wanted to talk. I told him to leave. He wouldn't. He stood on my porch for 20 minutes, yelling about his rights as a father, about how you poisoned me against him." Linda paused. "He said he knows you're hiding somewhere in Hartford. Said it's only a matter of time before he finds you." Celine closed her eyes. "Did he threaten you?" "Not directly. But the way he looked at me." Linda's voice broke. "Celine, I'm scared. Call the police, file a report." "I did. They said unless he physically harms me, there's nothing they can do. The restraining order only covers you and Noah." Celine wanted to scream, wanted to throw the phone against the wall, wanted to disappear into a hole where Damien could never find her. Instead, she said, "Stay with Aunt Marie for a few days, just until this calms down." "What about you?" "I'm safe. Are you?" Celine didn't answer. After they hung up, she sat in the dark living room, listening to Noah's soft breathing from the bedroom, and felt the walls closing in. Friday morning, everything fell apart. Kyle was in a meeting with city developers when Dante called. "We have a problem." Kyle excused himself, stepping into the hallway. "What kind of problem?" "The kind where Damien Cross just walked into Hartford Police Department and filed kidnapping charges against Celine." Kyle's grip tightened on the phone. "On what grounds?" "Says she violated custody terms by keeping Noah away from supervised visitation. Says she's in contempt of court. HPD's opening an investigation." "She hasn't violated anything. The court order allows her to maintain sole custody pending evaluation." "Doesn't matter. Damien's playing victim. Got himself a better lawyer, some ambulance chaser who specializes in father's rights cases. They're spinning this as parental alienation. Cale's jaw clenched. Can they make it stick? Not long term, but short term. They can make her life hell. Police want to interview her, verify Noah's location, check the safe house. Absolutely not. Kyle, if she refuses to cooperate, it looks like she's hiding something. She is hiding something. She's hiding from a man who's been terrorizing her for 4 years. Try explaining that to a cop who thinks domestic disputes are overblown drama. Kale exhaled slowly. Set up the interview, but I want Patricia there, and I want it on record. Officially. Done. But there's more. What? Damien's lawyer subpoenaed Celine's employment records. Wants to know who hired her, why, how much she makes. They're building a case that you've been financially coercing her. Cale went very still. Say that again. They're claiming you used your position to manipulate a vulnerable employee into a relationship, that you're controlling her the same way Damien did, just with money instead of violence. The accusation hit like a physical blow, because it wasn't entirely wrong. Cale had used his resources to build an escape route around Celine, had leveraged his network to provide lawyers, doctors, housing, had offered protection with the implicit understanding that she was now under his umbrella. He told himself it was different because he wasn't hurting her, but control was still control, even when it came wrapped in good intentions. Does Celine know? Kyle asked quietly. Not yet. Thought you'd want to tell her yourself. Cale hung up. For the first time in years, the Mafia boss who controlled an empire through calculation and strategy didn't know what to do next. Celine was folding laundry when Kyle arrived at the safe house that afternoon. She looked up as he entered, immediately sensing something wrong. What happened? Kale closed the door behind him. Damien filed kidnapping charges. The laundry basket slipped from her hands, clothes scattering across the floor. What? He's claiming you're in contempt of court for keeping Noah from supervised visitation. But I haven't. The visitation center called me 3 times. I showed up. He didn't. Doesn't matter. He's rewriting the narrative, making himself the victim. Cale paused. HPD wants to interview you. Celine sank onto the couch. When? Tomorrow. Patricia will be there. And if I refuse? They'll issue a warrant. Celine pressed her hands to her face. This is never going to end. There's more. She looked up. Kyle told her about the subpoena, the financial coercion allegations, the claim that he was controlling her. With every word, Celine's expression shifted from shock to something harder. Is it true? She asked quietly. Is what true? Are you controlling me? The question landed like a blade between his ribs. No, Kyle said. But you're managing my life, deciding where I live, who protects me, what's safe. You offered to make Damien disappear without asking if that's what I wanted. I was trying to help, or you were trying to fix something you couldn't control. Celine stood, her voice shaking. I spent 4 years with a man who made every decision for me, who told me what to wear, who to see, how to think, and now I'm letting another man do the same thing, just with better intentions. That's not fair, isn't it? Celine crossed her arms. You hired me because you saw Bruises. You've been watching me since day 1. You built an entire escape plan around me without asking what I needed. How is that different from Damien monitoring my phone and isolating me from my family? Cale's voice went cold. I never hurt you. No. You just made yourself indispensable, so now I'm dependent on you the same way I was dependent on him. Celine's eyes filled with tears. And I'm so grateful for everything you've done. But I'm also terrified that I traded one cage for another. The words hung between them, brutal and honest. Cale stared at her, feeling something crack inside his chest. Because she was right. He'd inserted himself into her life with the conviction that he knew better, that his protection justified his control, just like his father had, just like Damien. What do you want me to do? Kyle asked quietly. I don't know. Celine wiped her eyes. I need space to figure out who I am without someone telling me. Cale nodded once, sharp and final. Understood. He turned toward the door. Kyle? He stopped. but didn't turn around. "Thank you," Celine whispered, "for everything, even if it was complicated." Kael left without responding. Outside, Marco looked up from his post. "Boss?" "Give her space," Kael said flatly. "But don't let her out of your sight." Then he climbed into his car and drove away, feeling like he'd just lost something he never had the right to keep. The police interview happened Saturday morning in a sterile conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and institutional cleaning products. Celine sat across from Detective Lisa Morrison, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a notepad covered in shorthand. Patricia Rourke sat beside Celine, briefcase open, recorder running. "Ms. Vale," Detective Morrison began, "Damian Cross filed a complaint alleging you've denied him access to his son in violation of a court order. Can you respond to that?" "It's not true," Celine said. "The visitation center called me 3 times to schedule supervised visits. I showed up every time. Damian didn't." "Do you have documentation?" Patricia slid a folder across the table. "Sign-in sheets from the visitation center, time-stamped. Ms. Vale arrived at 2 p.m. for each scheduled appointment. Mr. Cross failed to appear." Detective Morrison reviewed the documents. "And where is Noah currently?" "Safe," Patricia interjected. "Location is protected under the custody order. I need to verify his well-being. He's with a licensed physician who can provide medical documentation confirming he's healthy and unharmed." "That's not the same as—" "Detective," Patricia's voice sharpened. "My client has a restraining order against a man with a documented history of violence. Revealing Noah's location would endanger both their lives. If you want verification, we can arrange a supervised meeting with child services present." Detective Morrison sighed. "Fine, but I need it within 48 hours. Done." The detective turned back to Celine. "Mr. Cross also alleges that you're in a romantic relationship with your employer, Kael Virelli, and that he's been financially coercing you." Celine's hands clenched beneath the table. "That's not true." "But Mr. Virelli did arrange your housing, legal representation, medical care. He helped me leave an abusive situation. Did he ask for anything in return?" "No." "Not even your company, your gratitude, your affection?" Patricia stood. "This interview's over. You're implying my client traded sexual favors for protection, which is defamatory and irrelevant to the complaint. I'm trying to establish whether a woman can accept help from a man without owing him her body." "Yes, Detective, she can." Detective Morrison closed her notepad. "We'll be in touch." Outside, Celine leaned against the building, breathing hard. "That was a setup," Patricia said grimly. "Damian's lawyer fed her those questions." "Can they prove anything?" "There's nothing to prove. But they don't need proof. They just need doubt. If they can paint you as a woman who manipulates men, first Damian, now Kael, it undermines your credibility." Celine felt sick. "What do I do?" "You distance yourself from Kael, publicly. No contact, no financial ties, nothing that looks like dependence. But I am dependent. He's paying for this apartment. For you, for everything." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Then we need to change that. Fast." That night, Celine called Kael. He answered immediately. "Are you all right?" "I need to move out of the safe house." Silence. Then, "Why?" "Because Damian's lawyer is using it against me, claiming you're controlling me financially. I need to prove I can stand on my own." "Where will you go?" "I'll figure it out." "Celine, please, don't make this harder than it already is." Kael was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "I'll have Marco help you pack." "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me go." The line went dead. Tag. Celine found a studio apartment in a neighborhood she couldn't afford, signed a lease with money she didn't have, and moved in with Noah on a gray Sunday afternoon. The apartment was half the size of the safe house. The heat barely worked. The windows didn't lock properly, but it was hers. No bodyguards outside, no surveillance cameras, no one telling her where to go or who to trust, just her and Noah. That first night, she lay in bed listening to sirens wail past outside and wondered if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. "I know where you are," Damian whispered. Celine's blood turned to ice. "You thought moving would help?" Thought cutting ties with your rich boyfriend would save you? Damien laughed, low and vicious. I've been watching that building for 3 days, baby. Saw you move in, saw you struggle with the boxes, saw you tuck Noah into bed through that broken window lock. Celine couldn't breathe. You're all alone now, Damien continued. No guards, no lawyers, no one to hear you scream. He paused. I'll see you soon. The call ended. Celine sat frozen, phone trembling in her hand. Then she heard it. Footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Slow, deliberate. Stopping right outside her apartment. A knock. 3 times. Celine grabbed Noah from his bed, pressed her hand over his mouth, and backed into the bathroom. Another knock. Louder. Celine! Damien's voice muffled through the door. I know you're in there. The doorknob rattled. Celine's pulse hammered so hard she thought her heart would explode. The lock clicked. The door opened. Footsteps inside her apartment. Celine locked the bathroom door with shaking hands, pulled out her phone, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone broke into my apartment, Celine whispered. He's going to kill me. Ma'am, what's your location? Celine gave the address, her voice barely audible. Police are on their way. Stay on the line. Through the bathroom door, she heard Damien moving through her apartment, opening closets, checking under the bed. Celine, he called out, voice sing-song and terrifying. Come out, wherever you are. Noah whimpered. Celine clamped her hand tighter over his mouth, tears streaming down her face. Footsteps approached the bathroom. The doorknob turned. Locked. A pause. Then Damien's fist slammed against the door hard enough to crack the frame. Open the fucking door, Celine! Another slam. The wood splintered. Celine screamed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Damien heard them too. This isn't over, he hissed through the door. You hear me? This isn't fucking over. Footsteps retreating. The apartment door slamming. Then silence. Celine collapsed against the bathroom wall, Noah clutching her neck, both of them shaking so hard their teeth chattered. The police arrived 4 minutes later. By then, Damien was gone, and Celine finally understood with devastating clarity that she couldn't do this alone. She pulled out her phone, dialed Kyle. When he answered, she said 3 words, I need help. Kyle arrived in 11 minutes. Celine heard his car screech to a stop outside her building, heard his footsteps pounding up the stairwell 3 at a time. When he burst through her apartment door, past the 2 uniformed officers taking her statement, past the splintered bathroom door frame, past everything, his eyes found hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. Are you hurt? Celine shook her head. Noah pressed against her chest so tightly she could feel his heartbeat through her ribs. Cale turned to the officers. What happened? The older cop, badge-reading Hensley, flipped through his notepad. Forced entry. Suspect fled before we arrived. Ms. Vale identified him as Damien Cross, subject of an active restraining order. Did you put out an APB? We're canvassing the area, but without physical evidence or witnesses. He threatened her over the phone, broke into her apartment, terrorized her child. Cale's voice dropped into something cold and lethal. What more do you need? Sir, I understand you're upset. Do you? Cale stepped closer. Because from where I'm standing, you're treating this like a domestic dispute instead of what it actually is. Stalking, breaking and entering, attempted assault. Officer Hensley's jaw tightened. We take all reports seriously? Then find him. The officers exchanged glances. The younger one cleared his throat. We'll need Ms. Vale to come to the station tomorrow. File an official report. Maybe look at some photos. She's not going anywhere, Kyle said flatly. Mr. Varelli, she'll give her statement here, tonight, with her lawyer present. Then you're going to post a patrol car outside this building until Damien Cross is in custody. Officer Hensley's expression hardened. That's not how this works. Make it work. The 2 men stared at each other, the air thick with tension. Finally, Hensley nodded curtly. I'll see what I can do. After the police left, Cale crouched in front of Celine. She sat on the couch, still holding Noah, her entire body rigid with adrenaline that had nowhere to go. Pack a bag, Cale said quietly. You're not staying here. I can't go back to the safe house. Damien's lawyer will... You're coming to my place. Celine's breath caught. That's even worse. They'll say, buh. I don't care what they say. Kale's voice was steel wrapped in silk. He broke into your apartment. He knows where you live. You're not safe here. I'm not safe anywhere. Then at least be unsafe somewhere I can protect you. Celine looked down at Noah, who'd finally fallen into an exhausted sleep against her shoulder. The boy's face was tear-streaked, his small hands still clutching her shirt like he was afraid she'd disappear. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Kale's penthouse occupied the entire 42nd floor of a building that overlooked the Hartford skyline like a throne surveying its kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows, marble everything, art that probably cost more than Celine had earned in her entire life. But what struck her most was the silence. Not empty silence. Controlled silence. The kind of quiet that came from money and power insulating you from the chaos below. Marco carried their bags inside while Kyle disabled an alarm system that looked like it could protect a military installation. When he turned back to Celine, his expression had softened slightly. Guest rooms down the hall. Second door on the left. Bathroom stocked. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. Celine stood in the entrance, feeling desperately out of place. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet. Kyle loosened his tie, exhaustion finally showing in the lines around his eyes. We need to talk about what happens next. Can it wait until morning? He nodded. Get some sleep. You're safe here. Celine wanted to believe him, but safety felt like a concept from another lifetime, something she'd lost the right to years ago. She carried Noah to the guest room, tucked him into a bed that was probably worth more than her car, and stood at the window watching the city lights blur through tears she refused to acknowledge. Below, Hartford sprawled in all directions, buildings and highways and neighborhoods where people lived normal lives untouched by men like Damien Cross. Somewhere down there, Damien was hunting, and Celine was running out of places to hide. Morning came too fast. Celine woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to close and Noah still asleep beside her. For half a second, she forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The break-in, the terror, the desperate phone call to Kyle. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her rent, making coffee with the precise movements of someone who'd perfected the ritual. Morning, he said without looking up. There's breakfast if you want it. Celine glanced at the spread on the counter, bagels, fruit, pastries she couldn't pronounce. You didn't have to do all this. I didn't. Marco picked it up an hour ago. Kale poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one. How'd you sleep? I didn't. Neither did I. They stood in silence, drinking coffee that tasted expensive and bitter. Finally, Kyle set his cup down. We need to end this. I know. I mean permanently. Celine met his eyes. What are you proposing? Damien violated a restraining order, broke into your apartment, threatened you directly. That's enough for an arrest warrant. Kale pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages. Dante's been tracking him. Last ping was at the Starlight Inn 3 hours ago. So we call the police. We could. Kyle's expression was unreadable. But cops move slow. Paperwork, bureaucracy, Miranda rights. By the time they process the warrant, Damien's gone. What's the alternative? Kale set the phone down. I send my people. We find him. We hold him until HPD arrives. Then we hand him over with enough evidence to keep him locked up while the courts work. Celine's pulse quickened. That's kidnapping. That's a citizen's arrest. Is there a difference? Legally? Sometimes. Kale's jaw tightened. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can either be part of the decision or not. Celine stared at him. This was the Kyle Varelli she'd heard whispers about, the man who ran an empire through calculated violence, who made problems disappear, who operated in shadows where laws bent to accommodate power, and he was offering to use that darkness for her. What if something goes wrong? She asked quietly. It won't. But if it does, then I handle it. Kale stepped closer. You've spent 4 years being afraid, 4 years waiting for someone to save you. I'm not going to save you, Celine. I'm going to give you the chance to stop being afraid. The words hit like a physical blow. Because he was right. She'd been living in terror so long it had become her baseline. She'd learned to move quietly, speak carefully, anticipate violence before it arrived. Fear had rewired her brain until survival was all she knew, but survival wasn't living. "Do it," Celine said. Cale nodded once. "Stay here. Don't leave for any reason. Marco's outside. If anything happens, you call me immediately." "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the night you called me." He grabbed his jacket. "I'm going to end this. Cheek." The Starlight Inn looked exactly like the kind of place where dreams went to die. Cale parked 2 blocks away, watching the building through tinted windows. Dante sat in the passenger seat, going through surveillance footage on a tablet. "Room 23, Dante confirmed. "Damien's truck is in the lot. No movement in the last 40 minutes. Cale studied the layout. 2 floors, outdoor corridors, multiple exits, security cameras that probably hadn't worked in years. "How many men do we have?" 4. "Marco's staying with Celine. That leaves Vincent, Tommy, and Sal." "Enough." Cale checked his watch. "HPD's got a warrant ready to execute. They're 30 minutes out. We go in, secure Damien, keep him contained until the cops arrive." "And if he resists?" Cale's expression went cold. "Then he resists." They moved fast. Vincent and Tommy circled to the back exits while Cale and Dante approached room 23 from the front. The motel was quiet. Mid-morning on a Monday, most rooms empty or occupied by people who didn't ask questions. Cale knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. "Damien Cross, open up!" Still nothing. Dante pulled out a keycard, courtesy of a motel clerk who understood the value of looking the other way, and slid it through the lock. The door clicked open. Inside, the room was chaos. Empty beer bottles covered every surface. The bed was unmade, sheets twisted like someone had been fighting invisible demons. Photos covered one wall, pictures of Celine, Noah, Linda's house, Virelli Holdings, the safe house. Damien had been documenting her life like a serial killer building a shrine, but Damien himself was gone. "He knew we were coming," Dante said quietly. Cale crossed to the window. It was open, curtain fluttering in the breeze. On the sill, fresh scuff marks. "He ran," Cale said. "Recently." His phone buzzed. Marco. "Boss, we got a problem." Cale's blood went cold. "What kind of problem?" "Celine's gone." The world tilted. "What do you mean, gone?" "I stepped away for 5 minutes to check the perimeter. When I came back, the penthouse was empty. Her and the kid, both gone." Cale's grip tightened on the phone. "Find her. Now." He hung up, already moving toward the door. Dante grabbed his arm. "Cale, think. If Damien has her, then I'm going to kill him." Celine had made the decision in the 30 seconds between Cale leaving and Marco stepping outside. She'd stood in that pristine penthouse, surrounded by wealth and security that wasn't hers, and realized something devastating. Hiding wasn't working. Running wasn't working. Letting other people fight her battles wasn't working. Damien had spent 4 years conditioning her to be helpless, and she'd been proving him right. So when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, she didn't delete it. She read it. "Meet me. Bushnell Park. South entrance. Come alone, or I disappear and you spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder." Every instinct screamed trap. Every therapist she'd ever talked to would have told her not to go. But Celine was done listening to fear. She grabbed Noah, still half asleep, wrapped him in his jacket, and slipped out of the penthouse while Marco was checking the stairwell. The elevator ride down felt endless. By the time she reached the lobby, her pulse was hammering so hard she thought she might pass out. But she kept moving, through the doors, onto the street, into a cab she couldn't afford. "Bushnell Park," she told the driver. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror, taking in her pale face and the terrified child in her arms. "You okay, miss?" "Just drive." 20 minutes later, she stood at the south entrance to Bushnell Park, Noah clutching her hand, searching the scattered groups of morning joggers and dog walkers for Damien's face. She found him sitting on a bench beneath a bare oak tree. He looked different, thinner, unshaven, eyes hollowed out by something that might have been grief or rage or both. He wore the same jacket she'd bought him 2 Christmases ago, back when she still believed love could survive anything. When he saw her, he stood slowly. "You came." Celine's throat tightened. "What do you want, Damien?" "To talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "We have everything to talk about." He took a step closer. Celine took a step back. Damien stopped, raising both hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. You broke into my apartment because you wouldn't answer my calls, because you're terrifying me." Damien's face crumpled. "I just want my family back." "You don't have a family. You destroyed it." "I made mistakes." His voice broke. "I know that. But I can change. I swear to God, Cel, I can change. Just give me another chance." Celine had heard this speech 100 times. After every black eye, every broken rib, every night she'd spent locked in the bathroom waiting for his rage to burn out. And every time she'd believed him. Not because the words were convincing, but because believing was easier than leaving. "No," Celine said. The word felt like stepping off a cliff. Damien's expression shifted, confusion, then anger, then something far more dangerous. "No? I'm not coming back. Ever. You don't mean that." "I do." "Celine, you hit our son." Her voice shook. "You shoved him into a table hard enough to split his head open, and when I tried to protect him, you threatened to kill me." "I was drunk. I didn't mean—" "You always say that, and I always forgave you, but not this time." Celine pulled Noah closer. "Noah deserves a father who doesn't teach him that violence is love, and I deserve a life where I'm not afraid every single day." Damien stared at her, breathing hard. For a moment she thought he might walk away. Then his hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with bruising force. "You're not leaving me," he hissed. "I won't let you." Pain flared white-hot up Celine's arm. Noah screamed. She tried to pull away, but Damien's grip tightened. "Let go. You're mine." Damien yanked her closer, his face inches from hers. "You've always been mine. No restraining order, no lawyer, no rich boyfriend is going to change that." Something inside Celine snapped. Not broke. Ignited. She'd spent 4 years being afraid of this man. 4 years absorbing his rage, managing his moods, shrinking herself small enough to survive his violence. But she was done shrinking. Celine drove her knee into Damien's groin with every ounce of strength she had. He doubled over, gasping, his grip loosening. She ripped her arm free, grabbed Noah, and ran. Behind her, Damien roared, pure animal rage, and gave chase. Celine sprinted through the park, legs burning, lungs screaming, Noah bouncing in her arms. She could hear Damien gaining ground, his footsteps pounding closer. She wasn't going to make it. Then a black SUV screeched to a stop on the street ahead. The door flew open. Kael stood there, eyes blazing with something that looked like fury and terror combined. "Get in!" Celine dove into the car, Marco gunning the engine before she'd even closed the door. Through the rear window, she watched Damien stumble to a stop on the sidewalk, screaming her name, fists raised to the sky. Then the SUV turned a corner, and he disappeared from view. Celine collapsed against the seat, Noah sobbing in her arms, her entire body shaking so violently her teeth chattered. Kael turned around from the front seat. "What the hell were you thinking? I thought—" "You thought what? That you could negotiate with him? Reason with him?" Kael's voice was ice. "He's not rational, Celine. He's obsessed. And you just gave him exactly what he wanted, access to you." "I know." "Do you?" "Because you could have died. Noah could have died. And for what?" Celine met his eyes, tears streaming down her face. "Because I needed to prove I wasn't afraid anymore." The car went silent. Kael stared at her for a long moment, then quietly. "And are you?" "Terrified," Selena whispered. "But I'm also done running." They returned to the penthouse under armed escort. Marco and 2 additional men swept every floor before allowing them inside. Kael triple-checked the locks, activated every security system, and stationed guards at every entrance. Only then did he turn to Celine. "We need to talk." She nodded, settling Noah on the couch with cartoons playing at low volume. In the kitchen, Kael poured 2 glasses of whiskey neither of them touched. "Damien's not going to stop," he said finally. "Not with restraining orders, not with custody hearings, not with cops circling. He's too far gone. I know. So we have two options. Kale met her eyes. We wait for him to cross a line serious enough that the legal system can't ignore it, which means waiting for him to hurt you or Noah badly enough that he goes to prison. Celine's stomach turned. Or I make him disappear tonight, permanently. No body, no evidence, no trial, just gone. The offer hung between them. Explicit, terrible, final. Celine thought about Noah's face when Damien grabbed her wrist. Thought about 4 years of violence disguised as love. Thought about the hollowed-out woman she'd been 6 months ago, too broken to imagine escape. Then she thought about the restraining order that hadn't stopped Damien. The police who moved too slow. The legal system designed to protect abusers until their victims were already dead. If I say yes, she whispered, what happens to you? Nothing you need to worry about. I'm serious. Kyle was quiet for a long moment. My people are good at making problems disappear. Damien becomes a missing person, cold case, eventually forgotten. I've done it before. I'll do it again. And you're okay with that? I stopped asking myself that question years ago. Celine closed her eyes. Every moral fiber she had screamed that this was wrong, that murder was murder, regardless of justification, that she couldn't fight darkness with more darkness. But Noah's terrified sobs echoed in her memory, and she realized with devastating clarity that morality was a luxury she could no longer afford. Do it, she said. Cale nodded once. Okay. He pulled out his phone, started to dial. Wait, Celine said. He paused. I need to be the one to call him, to set the meeting. Her voice shook. If I'm asking you to do this, I have to own it, all of it. Cale studied her carefully. You understand what you're asking? Yes. Once it's done, there's no taking it back. I know. He handed her a burner phone. Make the call. Celine's hands trembled as she dialed Damien's number, the number she'd deleted and rememorized 100 times. He answered on the first ring. Cell. She closed her eyes. We need to talk, face to face, no lawyers, no cops, just us. Where? The old warehouse on River Street, where we used to go when we first met, 9 o'clock tonight. A pause. How do I know this isn't a trap? Because I'm tired of fighting, and I think maybe you're right. Maybe we can fix this. The lie tasted like poison, but Damien believed it, because abusers always believed their victims would come back. 9 o'clock, he repeated. Just you. Just me. She hung up, looked at Kyle. It's done. Kyle made 3 phone calls, short, clipped, coded language Celine didn't fully understand. Then he turned back to her. My people will be in position by 8. When Damien arrives, they'll handle it. You stay here. With Noah. With Marco. When it's over, I'll call you. I want to be there. Absolutely not. He's a monster, and what happens next isn't something you need to witness. Kyle's voice gentled slightly. You asked me to handle this, so let me handle it. Celine wanted to argue. She didn't, because deep down she knew Kale was right. Some doors, once opened, destroyed everyone who walked through them. Axe. 9 o'clock arrived with the weight of inevitability. Celine sat in Kyle's penthouse, Noah asleep in her arms, watching the clock tick toward the moment that would change everything. Marco stood by the window, silent and vigilant. Her phone buzzed. Kyle. He's here. 2 words. Celine's pulse spiked. She imagined Damien pulling into that abandoned warehouse, expecting reconciliation, expecting her. Finding Kyle's people instead. What happened next would be quick, clinical, permanent, and she'd ordered it. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. Her phone rang. Kyle. She answered with shaking hands. Is it done? Silence on the other end. Then, we have a problem. Celine's blood went cold. What kind of problem? Damien didn't come alone. What? He brought a gun and a hostage. The world tilted. Who? Kale's voice was tight with fury. Your mother. Celine's phone slipped from her hand, clattering against the floor. Through the speakers, she heard Kyle shouting orders, heard car doors slamming, heard her mother screaming in the background, and she understood with horrifying clarity that the trap she'd set for Damien had just sprung in reverse. Now everyone she loved was in the same place, with a desperate man holding a gun. And it was entirely her fault. Celine didn't remember grabbing her coat or racing to the elevator or screaming at Marco to drive faster. She only remembered the warehouse materializing through the windshield like something from a nightmare. Rusted metal siding, shattered windows, the kind of abandoned industrial skeleton that Hartford had forgotten decades ago. 3 black SUVs surrounded the building, headlights cutting through darkness. Men in dark suits moved with military precision, establishing perimeters, checking sight lines. And somewhere inside that building, Damien held her mother at gunpoint. Marco grabbed Celine's arm before she could bolt from the car. "You can't go in there." "That's my mother." "Which is exactly why you need to stay here. Boss's orders." Celine ripped her arm free. "I don't work for your boss." She was out of the car before Marco could stop her, sprinting toward the warehouse entrance. 2 of Kyle's men tried to intercept her. She dodged the first, ducked under the second's reaching arm, and crashed through the rusted door into darkness that smelled like oil and decay. Inside, fluorescent work lights had been set up, casting harsh shadows across a cavernous space filled with abandoned machinery and 20 years of industrial neglect. Kale stood 30 feet from the entrance, hands raised, his voice calm but carrying an edge that could cut glass. "Damien, let's talk about this." Celine's eyes adjusted to the light, and she saw them. Damien stood in the center of the warehouse floor, one arm wrapped around Linda Vale's throat, the other holding a pistol pressed against her temple. Linda's face was tear-streaked, her eyes wide with terror, but she wasn't struggling. She'd gone still in that terrible way prey animals do when they know movement means death. "There's nothing to talk about," Damien said. His voice was raw, shredded by something that might have been grief or madness or both. "You took my family, so I'm taking hers." "She's not part of this," Kyle said. "Everything's part of this." Damien's arm tightened around Linda's throat. "You think you can just erase me? Make me disappear? I know what you are, Varelli. I know what you do to people who get in your way. Then you know you're not walking out of here. Neither is she." The warehouse went silent. Then Celine stepped forward into the light. "Damien." His head snapped toward her voice. For a moment, his expression cycled through emotions too fast to track. Surprise, rage, longing, hatred. Sell. The way he said her name made her skin crawl. "You came. Let her go. Not until we talk." "We are talking." "No!" Damien shook his head violently. "We're talking alone. No guns, no bodyguards. Just you and me. Like it used to be." Kyle moved slightly, positioning himself between Celine and Damien. "That's not happening." "Then her mother dies." Damien pressed the gun harder against Linda's skull. "And it's your fault." Celine's pulse hammered. She could see Kyle's men circling, calculating angles, looking for a clear shot. But Damien was using Linda as a human shield, keeping her body between himself and every weapon in the room. One wrong move and her mother was dead. "Okay," Celine heard herself say. "Okay, just us. But you have to let her go first." "You think I'm stupid?" "I think you love me." The lie tasted like battery acid. "And I think if you ever loved me at all, you'll let my mother walk away." Damien stared at her, breathing hard. Sweat rolled down his face despite the warehouse cold. His hand trembled against Linda's throat. "You'll run," he said. "I won't. You'll let him kill me." "I'm standing here, aren't I?" Celine took a step forward. Kale grabbed her arm. She shook him off. "I could have stayed away. Could have let this play out. But I came because I need to say something to you, face to face." Damien's expression flickered. Hope. Desperate, pathetic hope. He wanted so badly to believe she still loved him. Because abusers always believed their victims would come back. Slowly, Damien released Linda. "Go," he said. Linda stumbled forward, legs shaking. Dante caught her before she fell, pulling her toward the exit. She looked back at Celine once, eyes screaming everything she couldn't say. Then she was gone. Celine stood alone in the center of the warehouse, 20 feet from the man who'd spent 4 years destroying her, surrounded by armed men who couldn't help without risking her life. Damien lowered the gun slightly, not putting it away, just letting it hang at his side. "Say it," he whispered. "Say you still love me." Celine looked at him, really looked at him, and saw clearly for the first time what 4 years of fear had obscured. He wasn't a monster. He was just broken and dangerous and utterly convinced that violence was the only language love understood. "I don't love you," Celine said quietly. "I haven't loved you for a long time." Damien flinched like she'd struck him. "But I did once," she continued. "I loved the version of you that made me laugh, that held me when I was scared, that promised we'd build a life together." Her voice cracked. "And I kept loving that version long after he disappeared, because it was easier than admitting I'd fallen in love with someone who didn't exist." You hit me." The words came out flat, factual. "You choked me unconscious in front of our son. You isolated me from everyone who cared about me. You made me believe I deserved it, that I was the problem, that if I just tried harder, loved you better, you'd stop hurting me." Tears rolled down Damien's face. "I'm sorry." "You're always sorry. Sorry after every black eye. Sorry after every broken rib. Sorry after you shoved Noah into a table hard enough to crack his skull open." Celine's hands clenched into fists. "But sorry doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't heal the scars. It doesn't give me back the years I spent being terrified of the man I slept beside. I can change." "No." Celine shook her head. "You can't, because changing would require you to admit that you're the problem, that your anger isn't my fault, that your violence isn't love, and you'll never admit that, because then you'd have to face the truth." "What truth?" "That you destroyed the only person who ever really loved you." Damien's face crumpled. The gun rose, not pointing at Celine, pointing at himself. "Then what's the point?" he whispered. "If you're gone, if Noah's gone, if I can't fix this, what's the fucking point?" Cale moved instantly, hands raised. "Damien, don't." "Why not?" Damien's hand shook violently. "You were going to kill me anyway, at least this way. I'm in control." "You think killing yourself makes you in control?" Cale's voice was cold. "It makes you a coward. Makes you someone who destroys everyone around him, then runs away before facing consequences." Damien's finger tightened on the trigger. Celine stepped forward. "Damien, look at me." He did. And in his eyes, she saw something she'd never allowed herself to acknowledge before. He was afraid. Afraid of being alone. Afraid of being unloved. Afraid that without her, he was nothing. The violence hadn't been about control. It had been about terror. "You're right," Celine said softly. "I'm gone, and I'm never coming back. You're going to prison. You're going to lose custody of Noah. You're going to spend years in a cell thinking about what you did." Damien's breath came in ragged gasps. "But you don't get to take the easy way out," Celine continued. "You don't get to die a victim. You survive. You face it. Every single consequence. Every single day. And maybe, you finally learn that love isn't supposed to hurt." For a long moment, Damien just stared at her. Then, slowly, he lowered the gun. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the warehouse floor, sobbing, great, heaving sobs that sounded like something dying. Kael's men moved immediately, securing the weapon, pulling Damien's arms behind his back, clicking handcuffs into place. Damien didn't resist. He just kept sobbing, Celine's name falling from his lips like a prayer. Kael appeared beside her. "Are you hurt?" Celine shook her head, unable to speak, because she wasn't hurt. She was free. The police arrived 12 minutes later. Detective Morrison took statements while officers processed the scene. Damien sat in the back of a patrol car, head against the window, staring at nothing. Linda wrapped Celine in a hug so tight it hurt. "You stupid, brave girl," Linda whispered. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry he dragged you into this. Don't apologize for him. Not ever again." They held each other until the trembling stopped. Kael stood apart from the chaos, speaking quietly into his phone. When he hung up, he approached Celine carefully. "HPD's charging him with kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, and violation of a restraining order. Combined with his priors, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. Celine nodded numbly. "And the custody case?" Patricia says it's over. With criminal charges filed, the judge will terminate his parental rights permanently. You'll have full custody. No visitation, no contact. The words should have brought relief. They just felt hollow. What about you? Celine asked. What about me? You were going to kill him. If I hadn't shown up, but you did. Kael's expression was unreadable. And now he faces justice the legal way. Clean, official, no blood on anyone's hands. Celine studied him. You don't believe in the legal way. No, but you do. And that matters more. Before Celine could respond, Marco appeared with Noah. The boy had been asleep in the car the entire time, blissfully unaware that his mother had just confronted the monster who'd haunted his entire short life. Mama, Noah said sleepily, reaching for her. Celine took him, pressing her face into his hair, breathing him in. This was what she'd fought for. Not revenge, not justice, not even freedom. Just this, holding her son in safety, with nothing and no one standing between them. The trial happened 4 months later. Celine sat in the front row of the courtroom, Patricia beside her, as the prosecutor presented evidence that painted Damien Cross as exactly what he was, a violent, manipulative abuser who'd terrorized his family for years. Medical records, police reports, voicemails where Damien's voice swung between tenderness and threats, testimony from Dr. Lim about Noah's injuries, testimony from Linda about the night she was held hostage. Damien's lawyer, the same young man in the ill-fitting suit, tried arguing trauma, mental illness, provocation. The jury didn't buy it. Guilty on all counts, sentencing 18 years. As the judge read the verdict, Damien turned in his seat, eyes finding Celine across the courtroom. She didn't look away, didn't flinch, just held his gaze with steady certainty until the bailiff led him away in handcuffs. Outside, Patricia shook Celine's hand. It's over. Is it? Legally? Yes. Emotionally? Patricia's expression softened. That's going to take longer. But Selena returned to work at Virelli Holdings the following week. She'd been on paid leave since the warehouse confrontation, using the time to move into a real apartment, one she could afford, in a neighborhood with working streetlights and neighbors who smiled at her in the hallway. Margaret Chen met her at the elevator. Welcome back. Thanks. Mr. Virelli wants to see you, his office. Celine's stomach tightened. She and Kael hadn't spoken since the trial. He'd sent flowers when the verdict came through, expensive, beautiful, with a card that read simply, "Congratulations." Nothing else. No phone calls, no visits, no acknowledgement of everything that had happened between them. She knocked on his office door. Come in. Kael sat behind his enormous desk, reviewing documents. He looked exactly the same, perfectly tailored suit, controlled expression, the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. But something in his eyes had changed. Close the door, he said. Celine did. They stood in silence for a long moment. Finally, Kael set down his pen. I wanted to apologize. For what? For overstepping. For making decisions about your life without asking permission. For treating you like someone who needed saving instead of someone strong enough to save herself. Celine crossed her arms. You did save me. No, I gave you resources. You did the actual work. That's a generous interpretation. It's the truth. Kael stood, moving to the window. I spent years telling myself I was different from men like Damien, that my control came from protection, not possession. But control is control, regardless of intention, and you deserved better. Celine stepped closer. You're not like him. How do you know? Because when I asked for space, you gave it to me. When I made my own choices, even dangerous ones, you let me. And when I needed help, you helped without asking for anything in return. She paused. Damien would have burned the world down before letting me go. You just stepped back. Kael turned to face her. That doesn't erase what I did. No. But it means you're capable of learning, growing, being better. Celine smiled slightly, which is more than most people manage. Where does that leave us? I don't know. Celine was quiet for a moment. But I'd like to find out. Without bodyguards or lawyers or life or death situations forcing our hand. Kael nodded slowly. I'd like that too. Good. Celine moved toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. What? Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Kael's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. You're welcome. Spring arrived slowly in Hartford. Celine completed her associate degree at night while continuing to work at Varelli Holdings during the day. Without the constant exhaustion of survival, her intelligence flourished. She earned a promotion to senior operations coordinator, overseeing logistics for 3 subsidiary companies. Noah started kindergarten. On his first day, he walked into the classroom holding Celine's hand, looked back once, then let go and joined the other children without hesitation. No fear, no clinging, no trauma-induced silence. Just a normal 5-year-old boy excited about finger painting in recess. Celine stood outside the classroom, watching through the window, and felt something shift inside her chest. Pride. Not the pride of surviving, the pride of living. She enrolled in therapy, not court-mandated anymore, but voluntary. Dr. Michaels helped her unpack 4 years of trauma, teaching her to recognize the difference between caution and paranoia, between self-protection and self-imprisonment. You're going to have triggers, Dr. Michaels explained during one session. Loud voices, sudden movements, men who remind you of Damien. That's normal. When does it stop? It doesn't, but it gets quieter, and you get better at managing it. Celine learned to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. Learned that healing wasn't linear. Some days she felt invincible. Others, she couldn't get out of bed. Learned that being afraid didn't make her weak. It just made her human. 6 months after the trial, Celine received a letter. It arrived in a plain envelope with a return address from a Connecticut correctional facility. She stared at it for 20 minutes before opening it. Inside, 3 pages of Damien's handwriting. She almost threw it away unread. Almost. But some part of her needed to know what he'd say. The letter started with apologies, pages of them, detailed and specific and completely worthless. Then it shifted into self-pity, blaming his childhood, his father, society, everyone except himself. But the final paragraph was different. I'm in a program here. Anger management, therapy. They're making me look at the things I did. Not the reasons, not the excuses, just the actions. And Cel, I see it now. I see what I did to you, what I took from you, what I destroyed. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that you were right. I was broken. And instead of fixing myself, I broke you too. I'm sorry. Not because I want you back, but because you deserved better than what I gave you. Take care of Noah. Give him the childhood I stole from him. And if he asks about me someday, tell him the truth, that his father loved him. But love isn't enough when you don't know how to be better. I hope you find happiness. Real happiness. The kind I could never give you. Celine read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in a box with the custody papers and medical records and police reports, and put the box in the back of her closet. Not to forget, but to remember where she'd been and how far she'd come. 1 year after the warehouse confrontation, Kael invited Celine to dinner. Not at a restaurant, not at his penthouse, at a small Italian place in West Hartford that served pasta made by someone's grandmother and didn't care who you were or how much money you had. They sat across from each other, sharing garlic bread and talking about nothing important, work gossip, Noah's kindergarten play, the documentary Kael had watched about urban development. Normal conversation. The kind 2 people have when they're not running from violence or orchestrating rescues or confronting armed hostage situations. Halfway through dinner, Kael set down his fork. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever regret it, leaving him? Celine was quiet for a long moment. Sometimes I miss the version of him I thought I knew, the version that existed before the violence. But no, I don't regret leaving. Even with everything that happened after? Especially because of everything that happened after. Celine met his eyes. Because if I'd stayed, I'd still be that terrified woman hiding bruises and teaching my son that love is supposed to hurt. And now I'm someone who fought back, who survived, who's building a life that actually belongs to me. Kael smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. You're extraordinary. I'm just stubborn. Same thing. They finished dinner in comfortable silence. Outside, Hartford sparkled beneath spring stars. The air smelled like rain and possibility. Cale walked Celine to her car. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for inviting me. Can we do this again? I'd like that. Cale hesitated, then leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to say no, to maintain the distance they'd carefully preserved for months. Celine didn't pull away. Their kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the desperate passion of people who thought the world was ending. It was the kiss of two people who'd survived their own hells and found each other on the other side. When they pulled apart, Celine was smiling. Good night, Cale. Good night, Celine. She drove home through quiet streets, windows down, radio playing songs she actually wanted to hear instead of whatever kept Damien calm. Noah was asleep when she arrived, curled up on the couch with the babysitter. Celine paid her, locked the door, and carried her son to bed. As she tucked him in, Noah's eyes fluttered open. Mama? I'm here, baby. I had a good dream. Yeah? What about? Dinosaurs. And ice cream. And you were happy. Celine's throat tightened. I am happy. Good. Noah's eyes closed again. Love you. Love you too. She stood in the doorway watching him sleep and realized something profound. For 4 years she'd been surviving. Now she was living. Not perfectly. Not without scars. Not without moments where fear still crawled up her spine and made her check the locks 3 times. But living nonetheless. She thought about Damien, locked in a cell, facing 18 years of consequences. She thought about Cale, who'd offered her protection without demanding possession. She thought about Noah, who was learning that fathers could be gentle and mothers could be strong. But mostly, she thought about herself. The woman who'd sat across from a mafia boss in a conference room, bruised and terrified and barely holding together. The woman who'd left in the middle of the night with nothing but a canvas bag and desperate hope. The woman who'd faced her abuser in a warehouse and refused to let him steal one more second of her life. She'd become someone she didn't recognize. And for the first time in years, that was a good thing. But 2 years later, on a bright October morning, Celine stood in the same Varelli Holdings conference room where her journey had begun. But this time, she sat at the head of the table. Margaret Chen had retired, and Cale had promoted Celine to Director of Operations, a position that came with real authority, real salary, and real respect. The woman who'd once hidden bruises beneath oversized blouses now wore tailored suits and spoke in boardrooms without apologizing for taking up space. Her team respected her not because she demanded it, but because she'd earned it. After the meeting, Cale found her in her office. How'd it go? Perfectly. Celine grinned. Chen was right. I'm good at this. You're better than good. Cale leaned against her desk. I have something for you. He handed her an envelope. Inside, a check. 6 figures. Celine stared at it. What is this? Back pay. For every hour you worked while living in fear. Every promotion you deserved but were too traumatized to ask for. Every piece of your life Damien stole. Cale's expression was serious. You earned this. Not because I gave it to you. Because you survived something most people wouldn't. And you did it with grace. Celine's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it to build the life you deserve. She looked at the check, then at Cale, then at the office that was finally, truly hers. I will. That evening, Selena picked up Noah from school. He burst through the classroom door, backpack bouncing, talking a mile a minute about the science project he'd started, and the friend who'd shared her lunch and the book the teacher had read about astronauts. Normal 7-year-old chaos. Beautiful, loud, joyful chaos. Mama, can we get pizza? Sure, baby. And can Mr. Cale come? Celine smiled. I'll ask him. They drove to their favorite pizzeria, a hole-in-the-wall place that served slices bigger than Noah's head, and didn't mind when he got sauce everywhere. Cale arrived 20 minutes later, still in his suit but with his tie loosened. Sorry I'm late, board meeting ran long. You're just in time. Celine slid a slice toward him. Noah wanted to show you his science project idea. Noah launched into an enthusiastic explanation involving volcanoes, baking soda, and something about dinosaurs that didn't quite make scientific sense but was adorable nonetheless. Cale listened with the same focused attention he gave billion-dollar deals. Watching them, Celine felt something warm settle in her chest. This was her family now. Not perfect. Not traditional. Not what she'd imagined when she was 23 and desperate and believing Damien's promises. But real. After dinner, after they dropped Noah at home with a sitter, Cale and Celine walked through Bushnell Park. The same park where she'd confronted Damien 2 years ago. But tonight, it looked different. Peaceful. Just trees and paths and couples walking dogs. "Do you ever think about him?" Cale asked. "Sometimes. Less now than before." Celine was quiet for a moment. "I used to be angry. Then I was scared. Then I was just tired. Now I mostly feel nothing. He's a part of my past, but he doesn't define my future." "That's good." "What about you? Do you think about your father?" Cale's jaw tightened slightly. "Every day. But not with grief anymore. With understanding." "Understanding what?" "That some people are too broken to fix, and trying to save them just breaks you too." He glanced at her. "My mother spent 15 years trying to save my father. It killed her. I spent 20 years trying to save you, but you saved yourself. You helped. I provided resources. You provided courage." Cale stopped walking, turning to face her. "There's a difference." Celine smiled. "Sounds like we both learned something." "Yeah, we did." They stood beneath streetlights that turned the park golden, and for the first time in years, Celine felt completely, utterly safe. Not because someone was protecting her, because she'd learned to protect herself. 5 years after the warehouse. Celine stood in her own apartment, not rented, owned, watching Noah pack for summer camp. He was 10 now, tall for his age, confident, happy. He didn't remember most of the early years, the fear, the violence, the nights hiding in bathrooms. Dr. Michaels said that was a blessing. Selena wasn't sure. Sometimes she thought he should remember, so he'd understand what they'd survived. But mostly she was grateful he got to be a normal kid. "Mom, did you pack my swim trunks?" "In the side pocket. And my flashlight, bug spray, and the book you're supposed to read." "Yes." Noah grinned. "You're good at this. I've had practice." After Noah left for camp, Celine sat in her living room drinking coffee and thinking about the last 5 years. The promotions, the therapy, the slow, painful process of learning to trust again. And Cale. They'd been together for 3 years now. Not married, neither of them felt the need to formalize something that already worked. But committed. Partners. Building something that looked like a future. He'd learned to ask instead of assuming, to offer help without controlling, to respect boundaries even when his instincts screamed to protect. She'd learned to accept help without shame, to speak up when something bothered her, to trust that disagreements didn't have to end in violence. They weren't perfect, but they were real. Her phone buzzed. "Cale, dinner tonight? My place?" Celine. "Only if you cook." Cale. "Deal. 7 p.m. She smiled, setting the phone down. Outside her window, Hartford stretched in every direction. A city that had witnessed her destruction and her resurrection. Somewhere in a correctional facility 3 hours away, Damien Cross was serving year 13 of his sentence. She didn't think about him much anymore. Didn't hate him, didn't love him, didn't feel much of anything except a distant acknowledgement that he'd existed and now he didn't. Not in her life. Not in Noah's. Not in any way that mattered. He was just a ghost now. And ghosts couldn't hurt anyone. Celine stood, stretching, and caught her reflection in the mirror hanging by the door. The woman staring back wasn't the terrified 23-year-old who'd walked into a conference room with bruises hidden beneath her sleeves. She was 33 now, successful, strong, scarred, but not broken. She'd survived something designed to destroy her, and she'd come out the other side better than before. Not because someone saved her, because she'd finally learned the most important truth of all. The only person who could save Celine Vale was Celine Vale. Everything else, the lawyers, the safe houses, the protection, had just been scaffolding. She'd done the actual work, and that made all the difference. Buonasera. That night, at Kael's penthouse, they sat on his balcony overlooking the city. "Noah get off okay?" Kyle asked. "Yeah, he's excited. First time at sleepaway camp." "You nervous?" "Terrified, but the good kind." Celine smiled. "The kind that means he's growing up normal." "Because of you." "Because I got lucky, found help when I needed it." She glanced at him. "Found you." Kael was quiet for a moment. "I'm the one who got lucky." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Finally, Celine said, "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "Your mother, Elena." Kael's expression shifted. "What about her?" "You said she died believing she'd failed, that she'd wasted 15 years trying to fix someone who couldn't be fixed." "Yeah, but she didn't fail." Celine turned to face him. "She survived long enough to raise you, to teach you what real strength looks like, to show you the difference between love and control." Her voice softened. "And because of her, you knew how to help me, which means she saved 2 lives, not just one." Kael's eyes glistened slightly. "She would have liked you. I would have liked her too." They held hands as the night deepened around them, 2 people who'd walked through hell and found each other on the other side. Not because they needed saving, but because they'd learned to save themselves, and then chosen to build something together, something honest, something real, something that didn't require bruises or fear or constant vigilance. Just 2 people, and a choice, and the courage to believe they deserved better. Celine thought about the woman she used to be, the one who'd believed love was supposed to hurt, that she deserved the pain, that leaving was impossible. That woman was gone now, not erased, not forgotten, but transformed into someone who knew her worth, who demanded respect, who understood that strength wasn't about never being afraid. It was about being afraid and moving forward anyway. Below them, Hartford glittered in the darkness, a city full of people fighting their own battles, surviving their own hells, searching for their own versions of freedom. And somewhere in that vast, complicated, beautiful mess, Celine Vale had finally found hers. Not in a courtroom or a warehouse or a penthouse overlooking the city, but in the quiet moments between chaos, in Noah's laughter, in Kael's steady presence, in the reflection of a woman who'd survived the unsurvivable, and most importantly, in the understanding that she'd done it herself, with help, with support, with resources, but ultimately through her own strength, her own courage, her own refusal to let trauma have the final word. The cycle had ended, not because someone rescued her, because she chose to walk out of the darkness and into the light. And that choice, that single, terrifying, courageous choice, had changed everything.